Welcome to ABB's monthly Tech Talks, where we deliver our latest and greatest technology and solutions to our customers to keep you most up to speed. My name is Jeff Busby. I run our sales organization for the United States. And before we dive into some of the logistics, I know there's some things happening in the Gulf Coast, so our hearts and prayers go out to everybody. Please stay safe, keep your family safe, and of course, if there's anything ABB can do to help you and your plant operations, we are standing by. Next slide, please. All right, we're going to dive into the logistics. So we're going to go through about a 30-minute presentation approximately. And after we'll have a Q&A section. On the right side of the screen, you'll see a Q&A box. So you can ask questions throughout the presentation and we'll address them at the end. You're going to be muted throughout the presentation. So make sure if you do have a question, you use the Q&A box. And last but not least, we are going to record the event and it will be posted in a place where you can go rewatch if there's something you wanted to go back and remember. And due to the recording, go ahead, you can go to the disclaimer. We do put a disclaimer that ABB is not responsible for any damages that come from this presentation, although I don't think there will be. Just a legal thing we got to do. Next slide. Okay, so like I said, I'm Jeff Busby. Today we're going to discuss redefining our factory acceptance testing. Due to the global conditions, we've been forced to rethink how we deliver our FATs. In a recent survey where we reached out to our customers and asked if they were willing to do face-to-face meetings, we found that only 15% would be willing to meet with us face-to-face today. So this has generated us thinking we need to come up with a very reliable way to deliver FATs to our customers. Today, Andy Dillon, who you see on the left of the screen, will present a success case where ABB set the bar on how a remote FAT should be successfully conducted with a customer. Andy's been with ABB for 22 years. He's had various positions in sales, proposals, operations, very experienced. And today, as it says, he runs our operations for our oil, gas, and chemical segment. So Andy, with that, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Welcome, everybody. Hope everybody's safe. Before we start, we'll have a quick safety moment, if I can get my screen to move. All right. So while coming up with a safety moment, I thought it'd be good to talk about stress during this time. We may be thinking working from home and we have no stress, but I think probably it adds a different kind of stress than typically normally that we have been experiencing. So one of the few things is to first accept the new normal of social distancing. The sooner we accept, we know as humans, sooner we accept, the easier it is to move forward. One of the things that probably got disrupted is structure of the day when we started working remotely. But one of the things, since we're creatures of habit, is to stick to the timetables typically we've been doing. And so therefore, we have some semblance of a structure that we've been used to. Focus on things that we can control. So stay active, eat well. I think eat well is not a problem. And of course, get rested, stay rested. Sometimes we tend to focus, since we are working from home, work way more hours than we normally would, and therefore not getting proper amount of rest. The other thing to remember is this social isolation, not elimination. So of course, using technology or other ways to stay in touch with friends and family. And how do we respond to stress? Don't binge eat. Apparently, I have not followed that. So I have to, for this meeting, we'll start changing my habit. Get fresh air, exercise, and of course, make sure you have enough contact with family and friends. So the agenda for today is going to talk a little bit about traditional approach, what has changed, and introduce some of ABB's remote capabilities for FAT. What are some of the keys to success for having a remote FAT? And of course, as Jeff mentioned, a success story that we recently had. And of course, talk a little bit about some of the impacts that can have on our project from a cost and a schedule perspective. And then of course, followed by a Q&A. All right, traditional approach, of course, is a witness face-to-face approach for both hardware and software. Typically during hardware section, we want to make sure that all the equipment that was proposed and ordered is delivered. All our cabinets are mounted, installed, our wiring is complete, our terminal, wires are labeled properly. You want to probably do some redundancy checks. making sure some failovers of if you have redundant controllers. And also it gives an opportunity to bring plant people familiar with a new product. Maybe it's an upgrade or it's the first time you're having a new system. It gives the ability to get some familiarization. From a software side, typically, as you know, it's of course making sure that graphics are configured, the logic is as per the requirements, and of course all the interlocks are there and alarms. So with this approach, traditionally, the benefits are that um, the customer and ABB team get to have face-to-face engagement. Anytime you have that engagement, you have a better rapport, you have a better working relationship. It allows opportunities to discuss other items than FAT that may be pending change orders or some new things, functionality that's requested or required, and of course allows customers to gain familiarity. Now, of course, with the traditional approach, there's some challenges as well. So one of the difficult things are aligning schedules. Sometimes FAT schedules move because of uh, execution change. There have been changes and has delayed the time it takes from the originally planned timeline. And people are not available. They have other commitments. So scheduling is one of the big challenges. And usually you have a limit of 2 weeks or so for testing, and you are not able to complete it. And then it requires further testing, or you decide to move things to the field to test. So um, then sometimes also critical resources are not available when, as you need them. And, you know, it has happened in the past that not all the code is ready because last minute changes or some other reasons, and the code is 95% ready instead of 100%. So what has changed? Of course, the pandemic has changed, and what has caused is a global rethink on how remote working practices should be handled. Almost all countries have gone through some form of lockdown or stay-at-home orders for the last 6 months. At ABB, we are still working from home, other than some critical infrastructure that can go to the office. One of the things we noticed, especially in ABB as well, I'm sure everybody in the world, the infrastructure that we had for collaboration probably wasn't ready to handle the influx of load. So increasing capacities of VPNs, Microsoft increasing Skype, Teams capacity in the data centers, all had to be updated. But I think by now everything has been updated, and we're still having issues, but I think it's much better. And most of the companies have been able to get back to the same productivity levels as I would say, March shutdowns. So the summary, what that means is basically that remote working is become normal. And in the past, where we may have thought of trying to ensure there's some mitigations that we have to put in place to make that effective, we now don't have to put all that in place. It's become second nature since we've been working remotely for 6 months. So that brings us to a remote FAT, and what are some of the things that ABB can bring to the table to provide a factory acceptance test with the same levels and if not better ability to test the system before it gets to site. One of the things want to leverage is our service product that we have out there that's been rolling out globally is our remote insights. It's a as you can see allows for an ABB to be in front of the hardware equipment, whether it's a network cabinet or IO cabinet or controller cabinet, with a device that allows a video feed back to the customers who are on the remote. It's basically one-way shared video, two-way audio. Of course, one of the key features is live on-screen annotation. So the customer can go in and look at it. As you can see from the picture here, if there's a certain spot that you want to look at closely, you can highlight that and let the ABB engineer know, and they can focus in on that so that you can see everything is right, or if you want to do a screen capture and take some annotations and keep that for future record keeping of the FAT, that's also possible. And of course, this goes across platforms. So this is basically gives you everything that you would get in a face-to-face for the hardware FAT, except that you can't touch it. But everything from a visual inspection, looking at all the details, you are able to see that with these remote insight. Um, Here you see some of the tools that are used. Of course, on the either side, you have the wearables that the engineer would be wearing in front of the equipment. And also, you can also use an Android device like a cell phone or a Apple iPhone. And the computer, you know, the customers would be using a Windows device sitting in their home office or wherever they may be to have that FAT going through all of the hardware checklists. And this is something, like I said, it's something that we have in a service, and I know we're rolling that out. This not only is allowed from a project perspective, but this functionality is key to being able to get lifecycle support for technical support assistance. Whereas in the past, we've been dealing primarily with voice communication on the phone or sending emails with logs. This way you can easily able to let the person see right what you're seeing so that you can increase your troubleshooting. So this is an existing technology that we've been rolling out in our service offerings, and this is now incorporating that into a project execution world. So from a software FAT, things a little bit more complex, of course, and usually this is usually where a lot of the time is spent in FATs as well. For the system setup, as we do typically, system is set up. We also are deploying across the region a customer network within ABB. It's called TeamNet. And one of the things we do with that is, of course, we can give customers direct access in TeamNet. They can actually go right into the system and be able to navigate. Or if that's not available, then we can do it through Teams and other applications. So from a procedure perspective, what's important in a remote FAT is to have a very structured approach. What that means is you need to have 2 to 3 online sessions going, so separate meetings. One is typically for graphics that you're looking at the effect of the test. You have engineering tools up where you are maybe manipulating some of the logic to make sure that simulate the configuration to show properly in the graphic, and we always have a punch list where we get able to document any issues that are found that can be would be come back later to make sure they're resolved. One of the things is from a structured approach is having daily kickoffs, goes over what are the schedule for the day, what are afternoon debriefs, what we have covered, what we are behind, and we look at the schedule to make sure that we can properly keep everything on track. One of the things is that this provides a very detailed punch list items where sometimes things may have not gotten captured because it was maybe just a fleeting statement. We want to make sure that everything that needs to be looked at has to be documented. And in the past, sometimes we may have been able to try to fix something before we move on. One of the things we recommend is that put it on the punch list, move forward, because otherwise it will be a much longer FAT. The other side benefit is also flexibility. We know that in cases that there have been some lost FAT dates, when there's some issues that arise that need to be fixed before proceeding with the remote FAT, it gives us the flexibility that, okay, we can take 2 days off while ABB goes and updates the system for whatever is missing or needs to be changed, and the customer is able to go back and resume other work activities without being jeopardizing and sitting idly where if you were in the face-to-face traditional approach. So this gives a lot of benefit as well. The other keys to successful FAT, of course, is having an internet connection, robust infrastructure, the ample bandwidth, make sure everybody's got an ergonomic setup. Of course, by now, most people have been able to get a good home office setup, so that should be not an issue much these days. The key thing additionally is to adherence to time. We talked about schedule and keeping on track of schedule. So we must be prompt on start end times. We must make sure we have breaks of 90 minutes because focusing on a screen or going longer than 90 minutes becomes some productivity loss. So of course, an agreed upon protocol, how are we going to log punch list items, and that discussion needs to be happening up front. From a testing perspective, in the past, because we may have 3, 4, or 5 individuals from a customer, and sometimes we break up the FAT. Okay, a couple people will look at graphics, a couple people will do this. So one of the things that with this formalization is that we have a single team, everybody looking at the same thing, and dual testing is not recommended. So along with that goes, we'll talk about some benefits of this single team a little bit later. Formal communication, of course, we talked about statuses, always keeping everybody on tune where we are. And also found that we could probably look at some dedicated testing displays that kind of gives the result that we want to see, so it can facilitate a little bit of the testing process. And everything is virtualized, so everything is documented online and kept track of. One of the key things is that people must be willing to speak up. Facial recognition, obviously we can't see somebody maybe has a quizzitive look based on what was said, and we can reach out and in the traditional approach, ask them, is everything clear? So since we can't see people's faces during this, we need to make sure everybody's willing to speak up if they're not clear. And as mentioned earlier, we eliminate lost FAT days because if something needs to be critically fixed, we can easily adjust our schedule. All right, what are the considerations? So the punch list item we talked about has to be very detailed. There should be no ambiguity of what it was written, why, and what needs to be fixed. We need to also make sure people who have been silent for a long time, we engage them, make sure they're keeping up with everything. They don't have any questions sometimes, or they might got distracted with something else, that they can be brought back onto task. Make sure we found out that wireless headsets are better, so that in case you want to stand up, walk around a little bit while looking at things, since you'll be sitting for a long time, it's helpful. Spare batteries, and even cases, spare headsets. Another key thing is to have multiple monitors. We recommend at least 2, if not more. Minimum 24 to 27 inch helps with the eye strain. Looking at my eyes going bad, I can't stare at a laptop screen too long, so large screens help. And of course, what this also means is that when we need certain key representatives from customers who have a certain knowledge of certain area, in the past, they may not have been able to come to site because it may be only a very small portion of the overall test, that they are brought in and that they can provide added value during the test, and then they can go back off. So this is all part of our scheduling. What we found is 6 weeks is probably the max you want to go before you will have 1 or 2 weeks break. Obviously, 6 weeks may sound a lot, but for some large projects, that's pretty common. So that's probably the limit we've found that we want to go without having a 1 or 2 week break. So it brings us to the success story that we talked about. We were fortunate enough to have an FAT with the same customer over 2 years. So we can show you what was traditionally what we were doing. So you can see multiple teams here working. You have one team over here trying to solve a problem. We have another team here focusing on something different. And here you have an ABB person trying to listen to both of them to making sure what's being done, captured, what needs to be done. So multiple parallel meetings, as you can see, that can be quite challenging. Not saying that it was a successful FAT, but there are many things to keep track of. And then this second quarter this year, we had an FAT with the same customer on the safety system. As you can see here, an ABB person sitting in our conference room, isolated, with multiple screens, looking at having a singular discussion. Distractions are limited. Very focused on tasks at hand. As you can see, he has different screens, task punch list items, engineering tools, etc. And of course, a graphic on the large screen. And of course, this was pictures of our customers' remote sessions. Apparently, a lot of them have pets to keep them stress-free, or their kids. So it gives people a more an environment where they're more relaxed and can focus, and also helps make this FAT go smoothly. Here was just a sample of agenda, when we're starting, when we're ending, what are the sections we're covering, what exactly we're doing every day. And this can be even further broken down to parts of day so that we know what activities are being covered. As you can see on the right, with about 250 IOs, 93 graphics, and about 4 weeks duration that we took this test, FAT. And of course, you keep track virtually who was attended, when, and how long they participated for. And of course, the punch list, the most important part of it. This is going to be your singular documentation, most important document on documenting what was checked, what issues were found, when it was noted, who's going to take action, and this will be used throughout the post-FAT to make sure all the items that have been completed have been or were found have been fixed before going to site. So one of the other things that they did, as we talked about, what are some of the things that are necessary, is one, to have a very clear defined steps that we're going to undertake because we don't want to waste time. So here we developed a 12-step process of what ABB or in this case an EPC we're going to do is before the test. What are some of the steps we're going to do during the test? And then after you're done with the test, what are we going to do? Sometimes you have to go back and reset things so that you can move to the next part of the testing in the configuration screen. So this is all well defined, all agreed upon, so that everybody has tasks and things can move smoothly. So what was the lessons learned from this FAT? Of course, rejoin when sessions interrupted. Things will happen. Keep saying what activities you're doing as part of the test. So where if you're not speaking and you're just moving your screen or mouse and seeing things, people may not follow exactly what's going on. So one of the things is that as we're conducting a test, we need to keep talking what we're doing, what we're seeing, so that people can can follow along a lot easier. Stay focused, follow the agenda. Of course, if Teams doesn't work, make sure you have Skype or other mechanisms to deal with online collaboration in case of some outages. Multiple monitors we talked about, and of course, you plan for network disruption. Sometimes, you can even look at from a cell phone, or if you lost your voice over internet, you can call in, and things like that can be done. So what was the result? So as a result of this, the project team received a customer quality award. And one of the reasons for the award was the structured FAT actually provided a more thorough FAT than they have ever done with a traditional approach. Because talked about in the previous slide that everybody's focused, a singular event, everybody's looking at the same screen. There is not multiple conversations, and everybody's focused and agreeing and bringing up questions on every topic, and therefore you're ensuring that there is nothing left behind or wasn't adequately covered. And in this case, due to the COVID delays that were going on, we were actually able to save 12 weeks of schedule by doing a remote FAT as opposed to waiting to do some more traditional approach. And of course, the customer saved $40,000 in T&L costs. This is a large amount, but the customer was going to be also overseas and many different places they were coming from. So this is a significant savings that they had on the cost. So with the remote FAT, so what are some of the impacts that people will see on the projects? From a schedule perspective, the one thing that we recommend is that we separate hardware from software. Traditionally in the past, we've always said, okay, first couple of days of the FAT, face-to-face, we will do hardware and then we'll go into software. But since we're using different techniques, it's important to say, okay, let's get the hardware done. We know we can even ship the hardware out so that you can maintain some of your construction schedules at site. And then we can focus on the software side and make sure we do a thorough test. Because we're doing singular one team, not multiple teams doing different pieces of test, you will see an increase in timeline of your software application testing. Traditionally, where you may have spent 2 weeks, you may actually spend an extra week doing it. One of the other ways to reduce FAT timeline is to do remote software testing at a unit level. Allows you to make sure that things are done at a unit level. So when you're looking at the overall plant being configured, a lot of the details you've already gone through and addressed, and now you're able to maybe streamline your FAT as well. And then, of course, the benefit to schedule is if there are difficulties that we are able to move remote FAT around to match everybody's schedule. It could be that a customer has certain things that are going on in the plant that they have to be there during the mornings. In the old traditional way, that means they couldn't travel. But now we could say, okay, we will have FATs in the afternoon. So that allows the customer to take care of any critical plant needs in the morning and do it in the afternoon. So as you can see, the flexibility is a tremendous value. From a cost perspective, as we've mentioned in the quality award that we got, there's a elimination of T&L for customers. And also from ABB's perspective, we're able to ensure that we can make sure we have the right skilled people available to support the FAT if they're remote, and of course eliminate the subsequent T&L associated with that. And I think what we have found is that the thoroughness of the testing that we do in a remote FAT from the software side will benefit the startup because you've done a, not because before we weren't doing a thorough job, but because of the focus and singular events, we're making sure that we do a more thorough job of testing, and at startups and commissioning activities are much smoother, whereas we know any delays there, the costs are amplified than doing it, say, in the back office. So, summary. So remote FAT is different in the sense that we have always been doing remote testing with customers at a unit level or checking out graphics during a project execution. So the remote part of it, of testing some parts of the project, are not new to ABB. We're just, based on this pandemic, that we're looking at the whole FAT is conducted remotely. And that part is different. So, with that, we've found the customers, as Jeff mentioned earlier, 15% of the people are willing to travel anymore from the customers. So remote FAT is gaining acceptance from customers, and as well, even within ABB, people who have been always doing traditional, they're embracing the change to remote FAT as well. We know the technology is ready, enabled for remote testing. We just need to make use of it. Of course, the major benefits, we believe there's an overall lower cost. There's a thoroughness of testing that may not have been always captured in a traditional FAT, and which results in improved quality prior to startup. And with that, we end the session and go to Q&A.
Hey, thanks, Andy, for that detailed presentation. I really appreciate it. We do have a question popped in when you were going over the remote insights. It is the remote insight certified for hazardous areas?
Yes, if you recall the railware device that the customer was one of the ABB engineers were wearing, it comes in two flavors. So one is for class hazardous areas, and one is for non-hazardous.
Great. All right. I have a couple more questions here, but as we're going through them, feel free to type any further questions in the Q&A box. So Andy, what's another question? What is the setup time of this solution to use for remote FAT?
We don't believe there's any additional setup time because system-wise, you still have to have all the cabinets and computers set up. So the only time we spend additionally is to making sure that we agree to a formalized test process beforehand. And typically that's done anyways when we're approving the FAT protocols before we actually conduct it. So there is no impact or additional time needed for this.
Okay. I got another one. Is there like a specification or standard that you follow for remote FAT?
Well, I mean, typically the FATs are governed by the customer specifications and what are we testing. From a remote perspective, it's system-wise nothing different other than ensuring that we have the right network connections and of course enough remote sessions to enable the remote testing. But the testing process procedures will be exactly the same as what we did before.
Okay. Got another one. Would this become a standard offering from ABB after the pandemic period?
We believe so. This is something that we want to offer to all of our customers to take advantage. We believe that the value it provides in actually with the schedule flexibility and the overall cost savings that the customer may be able to realize, that this is something that we will offer to all our customers, and hoping that they can make avail of it and see the overall benefit. And if it's not required, and if customer for some reason is not able to do it, we of course can still manage the traditional FAT with all the necessary precautions during this time.
Okay, got another one. What type of camera setup does ABB recommend when doing hardware FAT, say for switchgear?
These HoloLens or this RealWear can be utilized. The key thing is going to be a network connection that is needed at the switchgear we're using it. So based on that, we have to maybe look at different ways to make sure the connection is there. As we mentioned, if you could also use a mobile device, so a cell phone and things like that can also be utilized for switchgear.
Okay, got a couple more coming in here, Indy. Could you please give some examples of specialized graphics created for facilitating tests?
In the success story I talked about, that's one of the learnings they kind of came up with, that if we had a graphic created where we were checking a lot of different screens to make sure everything was right, you could create graphics where a lot of those items are already kind of configured to show, lack of a better word, green light or red light if all the things are not there, like is all the interlocks working or all the alarms or something. So this would require a little bit of a development during the project, maybe specific to the customer needs, but that's what we're thinking, is that there could be graphic created that can further streamline the process and speed up the process.
Okay, thanks, Indy. Got another one. Would you consider opening the remote FAT with, of course, with client approval, to others not in the project to witness for training purposes?
Yeah, I mean, as long as from a customer perspective, we have no issues opening it to anybody else from the customer side, provided they are employees of the customers or non-project people.
Okay. I think we have one more here. For the project and execution, for project and execution, does the remote FAT reflect an economic improvement, or does the cost increase?
As I mentioned, so there is a defined additional time that it takes to do remote FAT, where you were working 16 hours a day doing trying to just cram everything in 1 week or 2 weeks. There is, I think from the software perspective, probably an extra week that you may need, but with an overall savings to on the project, I think that's a minimal impact or no impact.
Okay, I think I have one more here. Does ABB support and help the customer get their infrastructure set up for the remote FAT? If so, is there a set list of tools that they will need to conduct a successful remote FAT?
Yeah, ABB can assist with the infrastructure. I mean, we need to have a discussion where the customer is going to be located. Is it going to be the plant or where? And then we can talk about options that we have to facilitate based on what they have available.
All right, got another one. How is cybersecurity ensured for all participants when control from participants is required?
So if we're dealing with TeamNet, as mentioned, is a separate system within ABB, so it follows all our requirements. You have user IDs, passwords, authentication, so that you're not able to get in. Someone else can't get into the system. So, I mean, we can follow up more with the more details on the cybersecurity perspective. But system, if it's during Teams only and the customer in ABB is doing all the driving, then ABB is driving the equipment and the customers are visualizing only. It's only when we talk about is that ABB or a customer is actually going to be driving. Then we have TeamNet, through which we have, so I'll follow the Microsoft security protocols.
Okay. And I guess let's take a note and we can reach out and to that customer interested in cybersecurity and ensure that they get the follow-up there. Also, I got another one. So recently had a hardware FAT with ABB. in Canada using Microsoft Teams and the TeamViewer software. There was a webcam for the video feed. However, the quality wasn't top notch. So what type of camera would we recommend?
Yes, so with this, of course, the wearable, you can have a much better video quality. And one of the things we have to make sure is that the infrastructure that we're using as far as bandwidth is acceptable. So we of course we will do trial runs beforehand, whether a laptop trying to do a video is a good enough camera or not. You can have external cameras put in that can bring you the higher resolution as well. But our goal is that we're going to be using this devices that are set up for this, the wearables, so that they bring the right quality of video.
Absolutely. And I guess bandwidth, that could always be an issue as well from either side. Well, that's all the questions, Indy. I really appreciate all of our customers taking the time to join the call, and Indy, especially you, taking time to put this together and walking us through it. I think it's really helpful. So thank you, everyone, and have a good, safe week and weekend with all the